Welcome back to Limited Time Only, Episode 3. I'm your host, Hayden Dale of Arsenal Pass, and this is a limited podcast about all things, of course, limited in the world of flesh and blood. This is Season 1, the Outsiders season, where each week I'm joined by a guest to talk about Outsiders draft, sealed, and just all things limited when it comes to the Outsiders set in flesh and blood. Now, this week we've got a great episode with a community icon, someone a lot of you will know, a face of maybe the Timmys, some would say, the Tall Timmy himself, a local to myself here in Sydney, Australia, who joins me to talk a bit about first week of draft and his love for flesh and blood draft, and particularly Outsiders, someone who's already done over half a dozen drafts and has a lot to say about this format and learnings from a bit more of maybe, that less full competitive standpoint. But we do talk a lot about our learnings in week 1 in draft. We even got to do a draft together last Wednesday, which was fantastic. Before I get into that, I do just want to shout out as well, massive thank you to everyone who's been tuning in to check out Limited Time Only already, episodes 1 and 2. Last week, of course, we had Nick Butcher. The week before, Yuan G. Lee, and our sort of pre-release primer. We are available on YouTube as well as all podcast services, so you can check us out either on the video or just listen to the podcast if that's what you prefer. They're all out there. Any reviews also help us a lot. It is on the main Arsenal Pass feed, and if you're not already liked and subscribed to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel, then of course do that as well. So now, there's a few things I want to talk about before we get into this week's pod and to our guest with the Tall Timmy, Paul, joining me. And one of the things that's been kind of talked about widely over this past week is distribution of Outsiders and collation of cards and sets. Now, if you haven't already seen this, some crazy boxes and cases have been opened with lots of Rainbow Foil Legendaries in them, a lot of them, like every second pack kind of thing, 40-odd Legendaries in a case. So LSS have done an announcement to say that this was a print run error. There was a swap for a short time of the printing in the Belgian factory where Rainbow Foil Legendaries went onto the Rainbow Foil Common run, and that resulted in more Rainbow Foil Legendaries. They estimate 0.4% to 0.8% more than they had planned for to go into packs, and these are clumped in these now being coined God boxes or cases, as you might have seen on Twitter or Facebook or Discord or wherever it might be. So, the good news is, I guess, is that they know the issue. They know that it's isolated to these particular small amount of runs, and that it doesn't impact, the long-term sort of printing of Outsiders, and it doesn't impact majority of Outsiders print run from the Belgian. The thing I want to talk about is in relation to Flesh and Blood draft and to Outsiders and to Sealed, of course, as well. And that is the differences between the print runs of Belgian, so the Belgian print runs and the Japanese print runs, the two product print runs that we currently have for Outsiders. Now, a lot has been talked about with these Rainbow Foil Legendaries and the Fables, of course, as well. These gold boxes, of course, like I just talked about, and these crazy collations that people have seen, and now we have an answer to that. The one we don't have an answer to yet, and the one that I think if you, like me, are a lover of draft, someone maybe going to the Pro Tour, maybe you're going to be playing Skirmish Season, Road to National Season very soon, which will also feature limited. There's a bit of a concern that I have between the Belgian print runs and the Japanese print runs, and that they are different. The distribution of cards is different. So I wanted to give a little bit of an understanding of what this is for those that maybe haven't seen it. I've been asking some questions on Twitter. I have reached out to through Twitter to some of the LSS devs to understand a bit about this print run, and I understand that Chris Gehring, maybe, who is lead developer at LSS, may well be publishing an article in the coming week on some of the differences between Belgian and Japanese print runs, and and I quote from his tweet, limitations of printers at the factory. That is what I've led to understand has led to these differences in the print runs. So if you're not familiar, what it looks like is we know all the issues with the Belgian print run with legendaries, but aside from that, the distribution of the packs look different. So the Belgian packs look like this, basically. You will have 3 to 4 generic commons at the front of your pack. You will then have 5 to 6 class commons directly after those. And these can be anywhere from 0 to 3 of the class. So you could have, say you have 4 generics, then you could have a 2-2-1 split, 2 ninja, 2 assassin, 1 ranger. Or you could have 3 ranger and 2 assassin, for instance, and no ninja. So there is some real variance in what you could have. You could also, of course, have 6 class commons, 2-2-2. Does look like quite a common split. Then when you get to, then you have either 2 of a hybrid common or a rare in the next 2 card slots. So either a hybrid common or a rare. And then you will have 1 rare/majestic. And that is guaranteed. So you always have 1 rare in your pack, but you could have 2 rares and a hybrid, or you could have 3 rares in your pack. And then after that, you'll have a common piece of equipment, and then the rainbow foil card, which, if you've opened one of those god boxes of Belgian packs, then, hopefully it's a rainbow foil legendary for you, all the better for it. But otherwise, mostly going to be a rainbow foil common. And that is what the pack distribution looks like. And then you have your 2 tokens. One of those can be the cold foil, which replaces a token slot. Now, this differs. So basically, the be-all and end-all of this Belgian print run is that you can have 3 to 4 common generics, and then you can have 5 to 6 class commons, and you can have 0 to 3 of a class common. You can then have 1 to 3 rares, and 0 to 1 hybrid, I understand it. 0 to 2 hybrids, taking those slots. The Japanese print run is a little bit more limited. It's a bit narrower, the distribution field, the width of the distribution, and what you can expect is a bit narrower. So, of course, 14 cards still in your pack. The first 9 cards won't be in order like they are with the Belgian print run, which is it's a little bit annoying, means you have to sort it, but it's fine. The first 9 cards will be class/generic commons, so still 9 commons at the front of the pack. These will either still be 3 to 4 generics, and then you will have 5 to 6 class commons, so still the same. Now, with this, majority of the time, and from what I've seen from opening and the collation and the data I've seen, it's about 50-50, maybe slightly more will you have 4 generics, but it's about 50-50, 3 to 4 generics, and then 5 to 6 class cards. But when you have 6 class cards, the overwhelming majority of the time, it is a 2-2-2 split, basically almost always. And there is one exception to this, and it looks like about 1 pack per box. You're going to get 3 of a class, 2 of another class, and then 1 of the other class. But you'll minimum get 1 of a class common. I have not seen a pack that does not have representation of a class common. So this is very different to what you see with the Belgian packs, where quite frequently you see no representation of a class common in those generic and those commons at the start of the pack. So that's a real big difference already from the Japanese packs. And then next you have, as I say, your 3 to 4 generics, and then you have mixed in with those your 5 to 6 class commons. And I've also, as I say, very rarely are you seeing one in about a box where you're seeing these 3 class commons, and never seeing less than 1, never 0 of a class common. Then you have your hybrid card. You always have 1 hybrid card in Japanese. This differs to the Belgian packs, where you can have 0 to 2 hybrids, and they are replaced with rares. Those are interchangeable slots. It's always 1 hybrid common, always. Have not seen it be without it. And always exactly 2 rares. So no 1 rare packs, no 3 rare packs, always 2 rares. Or Majestic, those take the same slot. Same as it is for the Belgian packs. And then you, of course, have your equipment. Same always, common piece of equipment. Then you have your rainbow foil, your 2 tokens. 1 could be cold foil. So the pack distribution looks fairly similar, apart from these 2 big things, which is the class commons can be different. So in Japanese packs, you always get 1 of a class common. In Belgian packs, you can have 0. You can have 3 more commonly. And very rarely in the Japanese packs, we have 3. And then the rares, always 2 rares, always 1 hybrid in Japanese, whereas you have 1 to 3 rares and 0 to 2 hybrid in the Belgian pack. So I just want to point that out, because the big thing about this is that it's really going to lead to some discrepancies in draft, especially for players heading to the Pro Tour very soon. What do you practice with? How do we know at the Pro Tour what pack distribution is going to be used? Is it the Belgian pack distribution, or is it the Japanese pack distribution? What are the packs they're going to be opening? They do repack. If you're not aware, they repack for Pro Tour. So they open the packs, make sure there's no misprints or whatever, crazy rainbow foil boxes, stamp the cards, and then put them into a resealed envelope, little LSS envelopes that you can open them, and they're all sorted, ready to go at the PT. This is what they've done in the last PT as well in Lille and for Worlds. So that's what we would expect to see again. But if I'm practicing for the Pro Tour, or if people out there practicing for the Pro Tour, how do you know whether to be using Belgian print run or Japanese print run? Am I going to expect to see 1 to 3 rares in my pack? Am I expect to see 0 class commons in a lot of packs, 3 class commons in packs? And that's kind of where I think some of this, the unknown is currently sitting. So I'm really hoping that in the next week, LSS will clarify this, because in my experience, knowing pack distribution is a really big advantage to reading signals and sending signals. It's going to be less impactful than uprising, because of the distribution is a little bit more varied. Even in the Japanese packs than it was in Uprising. But it is really important to know. So stay tuned. We'll definitely be talking about this more through limited time only over the next couple of weeks, and I do want to harp on. Now, the reason I do just want to give a few things, the reason I think understanding pack distribution is really important is, like I say, it allows you to read signals. So I'll use an example. If you get past after pick one, and there's no hybrid card in your Japanese pack, you know there was a hybrid card in there. You absolutely know there's always 1 hybrid common in there, exactly 1. And if that card's gone, well, you know what the person to your right took. If that same pack comes to you in a Belgian pack, you don't know if it was a rare, if it was a hybrid card, you don't know. consequently, or conversely as well, let's say another example, pack 1, pick 1, or even let's use pick 2. You ship pick 2 with the Japanese pack. There is 0 of a class common in there. There's two cards missing. There's 3 generics, and there's 4 class commons left. So there's been either a generic and a class common taken. How do you know what class it is? If you know that it could have been, because of the Belgian print runs, there could have been 0 of that's ninja in those packs anyway to start with. So was there 3 of something else? It's really hard to know. So I think the Japanese print run is my preferred. If we're using this for draft, there's a bit of an easier way to tell what's in packs. It gives you more information. I think it gives you this ability to read packs more, which I think is a skill in Flesh and Blood and draft. So yeah, I'm really excited to see, I'm anticipating to see what LSS will announce in regards to these print runs. Anyway, that's my piece on Outsiders draft distribution and packs. For the main topic of the pod, or my interview this week, my guest this week, it is the Tall Timmy. I do want to shout out the Tall Timmy. If you're not following him on YouTube, go and check him out. He does some amazing stuff. He's a very funny guy. He's a very genuine dude. One of the people that I've met who just loves Flesh and Blood and loves trading card games and loves the community and does a lot for it. So make sure to go check him out. Follow him on Twitter as well. His handle will be on the this part of the video, but it is at the Tall Timmy 1 on Twitter. And with that said, let's get into it and speak with Paul. Episode 3 of Limited Time Only, and I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming someone that I call not only a friend, because we are local to each other, which I'm very lucky to have him here, but an amazing member of the Flesh and Blood community. It is the Tall Timmy. Welcome to Limited Time Only.
Oh, cheers for having me on, Hayden. This is a very good morning indeed, and happy to be here. Thanks for the call up.
Now, for those that don't know you, I don't know why they at this point wouldn't know who you are, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the world of Flesh and Blood.
Awesome. My name's Paul. I live in Sydney, Australia. Father of 3 kids that keep me on my toes, and I love Flesh and Blood TCGs. I've been playing them since I was a very little child, and when I first got into Flesh and Blood, I created a YouTube channel, a smallish channel called the Tall Timmy, where we talk about all things flesh and blood. It's a bit of a variety show, so check it out. You might find something that you enjoy.
Team, right?
Team, yep.
Yeah, please do go and check out the Tall Timmy YouTube channel if you haven't already. Paul documents all things, including bath time pack openings. So just saying. Outsiders Draft. Now, you have been absolutely fiending for Outsiders Draft. I know because there is multiple groups that we're in together. We've even had direct messages where you're saying draft question mark, draft tonight. Can we do a draft this weekend? I'm going to try and fit a draft in at this time. So how many Outsiders Drafts have you done thus far? And what's your first thoughts on the format?
Awesome. Well, I did the 4 pre-releases, and I've done 6 drafts, and I believe tonight will be number 7. I think the format is amazing. I'm not the most experienced drafter in Flesh and Blood. I did a lot of limited in Magic. I 6-0'd twice in Magic Nationals for draft, so I feel like I am a fairly competent drafter, especially in MTG. I really enjoyed grinding Magic Online drafts for quite a while, and I think so my experience with Flesh and Blood's not that great. I have drafted Uprising a fair bit, as most people have, because the set's been out for nearly a year. I've done a couple of Welcome to Wraith drafts, and that's about it. So I guess not only do I think the set is so enjoyable to draft, I think the fact, Hayden, that we haven't had a new draftable set in so long, and how much enjoyment the community's getting from it is just a testament that I believe how good it is, but also I think the game really needs to continue to move in this direction. I think having strong limited formats that come out a few times a year is really key to the game's long-term success, because there's plenty of people out there like myself that really, really live and breathe limited when it comes to TCGs. Sure, we might like constructed too, but there's a whole community within a community that just really enjoy drafting, first and foremost.
Yeah, in Europe, I mean, I got to say this, Paul, he's a humble man, because how did you qualify for nationals last year?
Oh, nationals. Well, I did XP grind, but I did come second. I top forward a couple of road to Nats, and one of them I was lucky enough to pair into Hayden and beat him in a draft. Unfortunately, I thought I'd lost the draft because I forgot to start with the Phoenix in my graveyard, but that didn't matter. But look, Hayden, to be honest, I think that was quite early in the uprising set. I think back then I was fairly confident with how Fire played out. And I don't think the community had quite cottoned on how to play around Fire. As the meta evolved in Uprising Limited, I think Fire became a little bit worse as people got more experienced in it. But at that time, I think I was one step ahead of especially our local area when it came to drafting Uprising.
Yeah. I mean, all this to say, really, I just want to point out that for those that, they see maybe the Tall Timmy YouTube channel and they see, Timmy, right? They think, Paul, he's the Tall Timmy. I would also say that, you're someone that I think has, dived headfirst into Flesh and Blood. You love the game. I know how much you love Limited, and you've put time and effort into improving not only as a player and a content creator, but, you've come such a long way. I know you had an amazing day one at Nationals this year. It didn't quite pan out on day two for yourself. You've top forward, top two road to nationals and draft. You've been there ProQuest top eights this season just gone as well. I mean, you are someone who I think maybe people see I definitely see as a great community member for both the aspect of coming from it from a community standpoint, a player who is at their armories, who loves the LGS, but also does get on the grind a little bit and does put their best foot forward to try. So partly, I guess selfishly, the reason I wanted you to come on Limited Time Only is to, a lot of time we have purely competitive standpoints, I think, on this channel. And I think having someone like yourself, who's I would call a hybrid of competitive and the casual, but you definitely do, I think, stand for that in this community a bit. So to hear your thoughts on Outsiders and how much you've been loving this draft format is super exciting for me.
Yeah, cheers, Hayden. I like to think I have the heart of a Spike and the mind of a Timmy. I like to throw my hat in the ring and really test myself. We play a competitive game, and I liken playing a TCG Flesh and Blood as an outlet, like a sport, perhaps. But sometimes I get caught up in my own mind. You've seen me in games go in the tank more often than I should and make silly mistakes when I don't read the cards. But no, Outsiders has been fantastic. I really think this is a rich draft environment. I think the meta within Outsiders Limited draft is going to evolve. I really think with the 6 heroes, LSF has created an environment that is going to evolve over time. I think the inclusion of the hybrid cards is very key to that. And I think we're going to see ebbs and flows in power levels between the classes as the meta evolves.
This format is very deep. That's kind of my first takeaway from the first week of draft. So I'm less experienced than my good mate Paul over here, the Tall Timmy. He's done, you said 6 drafts already. I've done 3 this past week. But my first takeaway, and we've talked about this, and sort of our group of locals have talked about this. This format is going to evolve, like you say, but it's also very, very deep. I want to ask you, let's jump into what me and the Tall Timmy are going to talk about today is our first takes on Outsiders Draft. Give some of our tips and tricks, things that we're looking at, some of the strategies we think are worth pursuing, some that maybe we think are less viable, some of the cards that have impressed us, maybe not so much impressed us over the first week, especially in different heroes and archetypes. But before we jump into that, what have you drafted so far? What heroes, what sort of archetypes have you drafted or linked towards so far?
Sure. I've drafted all the heroes except for Azalea. So I haven't had a chance to draft Azalea, but I've drafted Katsu, Benji, Azuri, Arachne. They all play out very different. So my first bit of advice out there for people is you really need to change your play style according to the hero you play. Okay, I know that sounds obvious to probably a lot of the viewers here because you have a lot of great players that tune in, but for, Timmys like myself, you really need to adapt your play style depending on the hero you play because they all play very differently.
Mhm.
very differently. And if you try and approach the game one size fits all, you'll fall flat on your face.
Yeah, this is not a format, where I think you can chop and change and say, cookie cutter it. Okay, I've got my
Mm.
fire deck and I want to be super, I'm super redline and aggressive here. I've got the same game plan because even between the ninjas in this format, that game plan can look drastically different between how you utilize your second combat chain link, how you utilize your yellows versus how you utilize your blues, and opposed to Katsu, where your blues are basically gonna be for blocking and pitching, as opposed to in Benji. Sometimes there can be really strategic pieces that allow you to push a big damage turn because of that unblockability, the hero ability on Benji. So even just that as an example, that's before I even get into Ranger. Wildly different. You've got a Riptide hero ability that gives you this free reload and allows you to play in a certain way, whereas Azalea, on the other hand, has to use the bow and the hero ability and is looking for a lot different sort of cards. So yeah, definitely my takeaway from week one as well is that I think each time you draft, I think you need to sit down with a plan of if I'm going to fall into this hero, what do I want my deck to roughly look like, and how are my games actually going to play out. And then we can get down the road, right? But I think the next thing, even beyond that, is each matchup looks different. Even with the same deck that you've got your 3 rounds, you could play against 3 different heroes, and your games can look very, very different, even with the same 30 to 34 cards, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly, Hayden. I'd like to tack onto that even within a game, your game plan will need to change. Something that I don't think we saw a lot of in Uprising, especially for us fire drafters, but I found in Outsiders, it's really key. You have your early game, your mid game, and your late game, and you might have to pivot quite hardly between being aggressive to being defensively to setting up unique hands, utilizing your arsenal, not utilizing your arsenal. You really need to understand where the game's at, where the life totals are at, what your opponent's pitching. It is very deep, and you have to pay attention to things. Hayden, you mentioned an important, in one of your previous episodes, Limited Time Only, you believe that Outsiders really rewards tight play, maybe even more so than how good the deck that you draft. And I definitely agree with that. My first impressions are, don't get me wrong, you need to draft a decent deck. But I think if you are a very skilled Flesh and Blood player, even with a more average deck, you can definitely 3-0 a pod. I think this set really rewards tight and crafty Flesh and Blood play.
Yeah, one of the complaints about Uprising was that games looked very similar, game plans looked very homogenous. There wasn't much choice and change. There wasn't archetypes really. There's a lot of archetypes in this, even beyond the 6 heroes themselves. Two Benji decks could look wildly different. But the other thing as well is that the other complaint was in Uprising, games won on lost in the die roll. For some people, it sort of felt the Fire Mirror could be won or lost in the die roll, and then on turn 0 and turn 1. And this is not that format. Yes, you can have a big dominated Azalea turn on turn 0, turn 1, and really set yourself up for success. But because of the power level of the set, the ability to actually grind back into the game, and I wouldn't say swing tempo, it's more about grinding back into the game with small edges here and there, utilizing over the next 5 turns, just grinding out 1 or 2 damage that maybe another player wouldn't be able to do, or your opponent is kind of missing out on, that can get you back into game. So it is a super tight format, and that was kind of mine and Nick's sort of thoughts coming from Sealed into Draft, and that is true. It is maybe not as grindy as Sealed, but and games can go a lot quicker. There can be some sort of more explosive, I think of Azalea with dominated arrows. I think of some of the things that Benji can do, some of the Katsu lines, but it is still a longer format than we've seen probably for the last 2 or 3 draft formats.
Definitely agree. I don't think there's a need to play the 40 card decks in draft, and you will see games go to fatigue occasionally, but it's not normal. Like I think Sealed, it was fairly normal. If you played a 4 round in Sealed, at least 2 of them would be going to fatigue. Perhaps maybe 1 in every 6 games in draft so far has gone to fatigue for me. But don't get me wrong, I do like, especially with certain heroes, if you can, maybe going up to 33 cards, 34 cards. I don't think that's a bad thing, especially if they are playable. I think having a little bit of extra fat in your deck is where you want to be.
Yeah, I think one thing that's going to be a common theme through the season 1 of Limited Time Only and focusing on Outsiders Limited is that there's going to be no absolutes. And I think we've already kind of alluded to this with just how different the heroes are, how different the archetypes are. There's not going to be a one size fits all. And you talked about this already about just how deep the format is, and we both have. But to say that, you should always play 34, you should never play more than 30, or 32 is a sweet spot. That just isn't going to be right for every single situation, because it's going to depend on the power level of your deck. It's going to depend on your game plan. Like I'll give an example, right? I had an Azalea draft on the weekend, and I 0-3'd. I 0-3'd my Azalea draft. Yeah, I did. I 0-3'd the draft. Paul's giving me the eyes there. And my big takeaway was that I just didn't have the right plan for the construction of my deck. There was a couple of games where I led early and had sort of like stretched out a lead with like this really good sort of Azalea turn. But then my deck composition wasn't right to end the game. What I mean by that is that I didn't have the right arrows left in my deck. I didn't have the right pumps. I didn't have, I shouldn't have been playing a card like Peace of Mind. I had Peace of Mind red in my deck, which just lost me 2 games straight away, because it's not an arrow, it's not a pump, it doesn't do my core fundamental game plan. That card in another, even Azalea deck, or particularly Riptide, it's going to do a vastly different job. So I just think it's going to be really hard as we, I think myself and my guests like Paul, we've got a challenge ahead of ourselves of trying to articulate the best way to draft and get ahead in this Outsiders Limited format, because it's not easy.
Exactly. And I think, Hayden, that a lot of the absolutes and a lot of those consensuses are going to be drawn by being brave and forcing ideas during your casual drafts. Like, the only way that you're going to falsify an idea or think an idea is fantastic is basically forcing it. What does a Riptide deck look like with 12 traps? If you're picking every single one, like, there's different ideas with each hero. Maybe like a really hardcore defensive Katsu deck, like with every zero blue pitch you can find, and every D-react and things like that. All your brush offs, all your peace of minds. Like, there's certain strategies that are only going to become known if people out there really force the issue. And I'm a big fan of that in draft. Early format is to, before you approach a draft, not necessarily force a hero in this format, but maybe a particular idea. If you end up landing on a hero that you want to validate an idea that you have in your mind, and just having that, being brave that if you're trying something new and you go 0-3, it really doesn't matter. It's all about learning and discovery. We're in the discovery phase, I guess you can say. Yeah,
listen to what the Tall Timmy is saying. Just because I 0-3 my draft doesn't mean that I'm bad, guys, right? Surely, please. Everyone's
6-0. You 6-0'd worlds, so that's all that matters, right?
Everyone's hearing 0-3 and going, why do I tune into this rubbish? No. So let's hypotheses. I think that's what I would call these, and that is saying, okay, this is what I hypothesize is a reasonable plan in this draft format, and I'm going to go and test it for this draft. Maybe it's not this draft because I don't want to force it, but maybe that I have a couple of hypotheses I want to test. Maybe I'll come to a couple and we're going to discuss them actually, but maybe it's a fully dominated Azalea deck. It's a really defensive Riptide deck like you just saw, and as that starts to open up for me in the draft, maybe I go down that route and I really test that hypotheses, or I take picks that I wouldn't normally take to try and go down the route of testing this hypothesis. So on that note, let's talk about some of these. Let's talk about some of our learnings from the weekend, some of maybe the things that we came into with some hypotheses that we tested over the weekend, or maybe we just stumbled upon things. I'm going to kick us off, Paul, and then maybe we can just kind of go back and forth on this. But one that I will share is my Azalea 03 from the weekend. I came into that with the idea that I wanted to draft a Widowmaker basically deck. A deck with Widowmakers, which if you don't know Widowmaker, this is the one that's defended by less than 2 cards. It gets +3, and pumps and defensive options. So I took defense reactions, I took Peace of Mind like I just talked about, I took the Widowmakers I saw, and I took all the pumps I saw, and I just tried to build this deck that I thought would be very sort of linear of be defensive when I don't have the right hand, get through to a game state, and then hit them with a 10 damage dominated arrow a couple of times. And yes, the first Widowmaker might be met with the equipment they have, but once we get the equipment out of their way, we're good to go. So that was my hypothesis. What ended up happening is that the games were a lot faster. There was a lot more damage coming from. I played, I think, 2 Benji and against an assassin. There was too much damage coming my way, and that just didn't really pan out. My defensive options weren't good enough. I never really had the hands line up. And when I finally got my Widowmaker turn, they still had their first piece of equipment. My deck was just too slow. My plan wasn't good enough. So went down the road of testing that hypothesis. Didn't play out the way I thought, but I did learn a lot from that draft. And just to maybe, we can kind of do this, both of us, but the kind of my learning from that was a card like Peace of Mind is a real liability in a deck that wants to play the hands when it draws them and be able to flip cards off the top, and to be honest, not play that many blues. That was kind of my learning. So I don't know, Paul, what about yourself? Anything that you came in with ideas that you wanted to test or things that you found?
Yeah, big learnings. I'll give Riptide a shot here, Hayden. So in the sealed pools where I played Riptide, you naturally open a lot of traps. Okay, I found anyway. So I was quite successful with Riptide, and then the first time it was the first ever Outsiders draft I did. I decided to, force Riptide a little bit. And I had this constant fear that I need to make sure I can present enough damage throughout the game. So I valued red arrows quite highly. And then at the end of the draft, I realized I only had one trap. Okay. Now, you might think, the traps, defensive, they're here nor there. But I found myself so many times in that draft not being able to, not having to pay to put an arrow into my arsenal, and then not being able to activate the aim counter. And the aim counters, getting those extra breakpoints, are key. So the trap cards not only are great for providing defense, giving your opponent annoying tokens, but really in Riptide, they're all about, if you haven't been able to arsenal a card in your turn, it's about playing out a trap and then putting an arrow in your arsenal. So when I played another draft, I valued the traps over the red arrows initially, and it paid dividends. Having those, five traps, maybe six traps, I just found invaluable in Riptide. Just having that ability to be able to constantly get arrows in your arsenal, because you may not have a front pump in some of your hands, especially if you haven't seen enough of them. So the traps are the other way to get those arrows in your arsenal for free.
Yeah, I noticed you, if people don't know, Tall Timmy refers to front pumps as damage buffs, non-attack actions, and back buffs as attack reactions. So back pumps.
Back pumps.
Do you know what? So true. And this goes back to what we talked about before about, is there a one size fits all? No, probably not. Sometimes it's going to be about realizing when you should take the trap and when you should take the red arrow. I think you'll find a happy middle ground. Do I want to take, infecting shot over a trap, but then maybe I take a trap over a red spire sniping, for instance, right? There's going to be times and card valuations that are going to be different, I think, which is really interesting. The one thing I want to say on traps is if you're looking at this from a bit more of a mathematical standpoint, maybe you're trying to understand the value of these traps in Riptide. You just gave a great example there. 4-card hand, I play my trap from hand. I get a trigger off my Riptide, let's say. So I'm looking at a 0 for 4 already. Now I get to reload that arrow. That's going to save me either one resource on my turn, or it's going to actually allow me to use my bow to flip up the card and give it that +1 attack with an aim counter. So you're potentially looking at a very easy 0 for 5 off your traps in Riptide. 0, 4, 0 to 5. And that is huge. And I think that's a good way to understand just how strong traps are in Riptide. On the flip side, if I've got my traps in Azalea like I was doing, what am I getting from these? So often I'm getting 0 for 3. Or sometimes I'm not even getting that if they don't come in with a 3 attack and I just have to block with it. Or I'm getting a card that is just a dead card off the top of my deck or in my hand that it's not contributing to my main game plan. So, already we talk about Ranger, and the strength of a trap in one deck versus another is wildly different.
And I guess a light bulb moment we had last week during draft was a good friend of the podcast and good friend of ours, Mr. Butcher, was with Benji. So we actually, Nick drafted Benji and I drafted Katsu. And then we played round 1. And then round 2, I switched to Benji. And we played about 6 or 7 mirror matches. And it became evident very, very quickly at the power level of Benji, and that the play patterns to some might not be obvious at first. There were many times when Nick or myself would, in the late game, block with a card because it's ingrained in our mind to sort of, stay on tempo, and then realizing the turn later that, holy hell, if we'd taken that damage and kept that card, we could actually just kill you flat out on our turn, because that card unlocked that extra 2 or 3 damage we needed for unblockable damage that would have got there. So that's another really key learning that I've taken away in these 6 drafts, is the power level of Benji. I'd almost, use the analogy like Icelander from Uprising Draft, possibly even more powerful. I think the whole game plan around Benji is to play quite aggressively in the early game, get your opponent down to 8 or less health, and then switch your game plan to defensively, and you're basically waiting for that hand that can one-shot them. Until you get that hand, you're playing very defensively because you need to preserve your life total with Benji. Maybe you're presenting a couple of Kodachis, and then as soon as you get that unblockable hand that can present 6 to 7 damage, you take the hit. Maybe you have a couple of pieces of equipment to block, and you win the game. A lot of people, I think, underrated Benji in our first few drafts. They saw the 17 health as a liability. But if you're on 17 health and your opponents are on 13, 12, or 14 virtual life, it's here nor there. And I think that's how you have to approach Benji. I think Benji is very powerful.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from Benji, I did a Benji draft on the weekend, and 17 life. Yep, correct. But look, if I get to turn 0, start my opponent at 15 life, it's like you say, it is rather it doesn't matter. I'm already ahead. The other thing as well is, even if a grindy game plays out, I'm going to get advantage from that hero ability. I'm going to get my faux ira, I like to call it. I'm going to get that +1 trigger. And then in the late game, I'm going to find ways to push through damage because I have unblockable damage. And one of the things about the set is that I think, especially early on, I think Benji's really powerful early on. I think we'll start to see that power level even out a little bit, but people are still trying to work out how to build their decks. So people are finding these hands where they go, wow, my hands are kind of awkward here because I just haven't got the composition of my decks right. I fell victim to this very much in the weekend. And you know what the worst thing is when that happens? Having your opponent just present unblockable damage that you can't even use your cards for. So I think Benji, my kind of takeaway heading into draft was, I think Benji's going to be a great week 1, week 2 draft deck. I think it definitely is. But even more than that, I think Benji is just powerful, like you say, and we're going to see it sort of live through. My kind of thought was, well, people might default back to Katsu more as they work out the best way to use the combo lines. I think Katsu really requires you to know what's in your deck for, Bond's of Ancestry lines, for even just like spinning wheel kicks and all these combo lines, recoil lines, things like that. But Benji is just as difficult to play, I think, and is a bit less intuitive, like you say, but is very powerful. So from a Ninja standpoint, I actually think Ninja might be the most interesting hero in this draft format, and trying to work it out.
Exactly, and I think LSS were quite aware of Benji's power level. It's not by chance they printed cards like Brush Off. Like, there's cards in the set that you are going to have to pick up in the last 3 or 4 picks from each pack, purely as sideboard cards. I think as the meta develops and people really hone into these Azalea decks or these Benji decks that can present unblockable damage, whether it's through an ability, dominate and such, you're going to need cards that you bring in from the sideboard. And these cards were printed in this set for a reason. I think LSS did a fantastic job that they, first and foremost, it feels like a lot of these cards were printed purely for the draft experience. And I think a lot of people will realize these, underpowered cards are actually there for a reason.
Yep. One thing I think one of my sort of big learnings about this format already is that we saw it in Sealed and we've seen it translated to draft, is this idea of playing out your hands can sometimes be difficult, and you don't want to be giving yourselves an effective IP penalty. The cards like Brush Off, Peace of Mind, Ravenous Rabble, Seek Horizon, these cards that allow you to use your hand either defensively or offensively in ways that aren't just maybe the core tenet of your deck. So play an arrow and pump attack with it, or pitch come with my dagger and then play 1 attack. These cards that allow you to use your hand a bit more, I think, are really, really important. And I think they're actually higher priority picks in draft, especially early on while you're still trying to figure out the composition of your deck. They're safe picks. And I think, maybe I'm not taking a red Brush Off in the first 3 or 4 picks, but maybe it's not a last 3 cards pick. Maybe it is a 6 or 7 card pick. It allows me to play out my hands a lot better. Maybe, Seek Horizon is a first or second pickable card. I'm not sure that's true. I think there's a lot of stronger generics, but that card is good. I think in a weak pack, I could see myself first picking that card to stay open, to allow me to fit it into any which deck I want, and it's still a 0 for 4. It's a 1 card 4 at worst. And then, Moment's Peace, Peace of Mind, sorry. I always mix up with Moment's Peace from Magic. Peace of Mind, on the other hand, I think is maybe a little bit more narrow because it has a resource cost. It's not a 0 cost, so you do need the blues to support it, and you probably realistically need a piece of Seeker's Equipment to really leverage it. But yeah, that's kind of a big takeaway I have, is I think my early sort of tip for drafting in this format is make sure you can utilize your hands to their fullest and draft in a way that's going to allow you to do that. So pumps are really valuable for that because they have go again on them. Cards that say go again on them are going to be valuable, I think, early on in the draft format, and maybe some things like brush off are a bit more valuable than you might think.
Well, there's a hero that has go again built in to its ability, and that's Little Arachne. I think Arachne's strong. I think Arachne can be quite strong, but it really needs a certain deck to leverage off that ability. One thing I've noted, Hayden, is how important pumps are with Arachne, because those stealth attacks with the on hits, you need to leverage off those. I don't think, if those stealth attacks for Arachne were just vanilla 0 for 3 go again, I don't think the hero would cut it. You really need to set up these hands where you're pressuring 1, 2 on hits every turn, and you need to have those pumps ready in hand that you can get 1 or 2 or one of those over every turn. You want to be presenting, you want to get through 1 on hit every turn, I think, to be successful with Arachne. A card that I really, really like is Razor's Edge. Okay, it's 0 cost and it blocks for 3. I've got no problem picking those up in blue at all for Arachne. You can pitch them away, use them for your Spider's Bite, and they can come in a clinch later to get that break point, to get that annoying token into your opponent's control. So I think pumps, you need to really, really pursue pumps if you're going to be drafting Arachne, more so than Azuri out of the 2 assassins.
Yeah, if we say red stealth cards, the 0 for 3s, and if we value the tokens, so Blood Rot, Inertia, Frailty, definitely Frailty and Blood Rot Pox in this format, as 2 damage, there or thereabouts, and we're able to use a blue Razor's Edge late game to push over our already 0 for 3, so that we're getting a 2 for 6 effectively. That's a good standpoint, right? Either we're getting 2 for 6, or we're getting a card from them plus the extra 1 damage and the token. That's really big. So I completely agree. I think Blue Razor's Edge is a card that's been a little bit, I wouldn't say underlooked, but it is. I think it's maybe a higher priority pick than some people might think. It's not just a blue. It's a blue that blocks 3. It's a blue that pushes breakpoints. It's a blue that does a lot of work. On the flip side, I think a card like Short and Sharp is a lot worse. That's kind of my takeaway. I think that 1 cost is really prohibitive in some of those decks. It's really telegraphed a lot of the time. And it only works on your yellow stealth cards, for instance, which is not the place you want to be. So I think that card on the flip side is a lot more of like a card I want to see in Benji, for instance, as opposed to our friend Arachne.
I really like also late game with Arachne to be able to play out a 3 or 4 link in the combat chain, and equipment can help you get there. So, for example, the boots that give you go again if it's a 1 attack.
Fleetfoot sandals.
Yes, I like them in Arachne. Okay, it can give a blue stealth card go again. Then you can play out, or I don't know which order you have to do it in.
Play your red first.
Yeah, play your red first, get your Arachne go again, then play your blue, and then come in with another red and a pump. Like you can have these amazing go wide hands where you might be able to stack 2, possibly 3 tokens on your opponent late in the game to close out a game or keep that tempo. So I think Arachne does want to have 1 or 2 turns in the game where they can go wide. But alternatively, Arachne can grind, and that's what I love about this draft. All the stealth cards block for 3. You can utilize the Spider Bites to your advantage, which are great with Arachne. Another thing I picked up, Hayden, is ordering your stealth attacks, okay? So if you come in with your Spider's Bite, you really want to, I think, play out your stealth card with the most debilitating token first, because they're going to have to overblock potentially if they just have a handful of attacks because you've swung with your Spider Bite. Presumably they haven't blocked it. And then you come in with another stealth attack after that with another on hit. So I think it's really important to utilize that spider bite to make the break points quite awkward for your opponents. So I think that's what I love about this draft format. I think every hero has the ability to pivot between these aggressive turns and these defensive turns quite effectively, whether the arrows block for 3, the stealth cards block for 3. That's something I am enjoying, Hayden, with this format.
I like it. Stealth cards block for 3, arrows that block for 3, ninja.
Yeah, I had to stop there, but that's why you need all those, come to fights and things like that, which I think are fine in Ninja, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, small things that we've learned from this weekend, and my kind of aim with this pod was to let Paul come on and share a lot of those as well, but myself, and I think let's maybe share a couple more, and then I want to do pack one, pick one with you, and then maybe just go over a few cards that have to you stood out as really high priorities, either just in general because of their generics, or because they're just so powerful, or because of particular archetypes that you like. So my last kind of thing I want to share from like a tip perspective is Seeker's Equipment. Now, Seeker's Equipment I think are really powerful. And they're not just powerful because of their defensive ability. People, I think the first thought was, okay, you pair them with Peace of Mind and you've got a really good 2-card hand there that replaces itself with the Ponder. And I think even just playing like 2 to 3 Seekers allows you to, stop some of the Benji, stop some of the hits because of Arachne, for instance. We just talked about that kind of play pattern there that allows you to maybe do that. The other thing as well is the Opt is really, really big, and it's particularly really important in Azalea. One of my turn zeros where I managed to do a really big turn in the weekend was pitch my blue, crack one of my Seeker's Equipment because it's not target damage, it's just the next damage you'd be dealt. Opt, see the top card, great, it's a red arrow. I play my pump, I reload my arrow, I swap it under, and I come in for 8 dominate, and my Seeker's Equipment has been used to enable that turn. So, it's hard to evaluate the damage that gave me, but if I wouldn't blindly flop, I don't think, in that situation. So that Seeker's Equipment is probably allowing me to enable 5 damage to push through, which is really huge. So that's kind of something I want to share, is that Seeker's Equipment and the Opt can be really useful, not just in Azalea, but particularly in Azalea.
Yeah, exactly. One other, if you don't mind, Hayden, just one other tip I'd like to share with your audience is for pushing someone into a class. Now, in Uprising, you were able to do that to some extent. You could really, the person to your left, you could really pass them a hot potato that they were going to keep. Okay, it was going to be so attractive. They were just going to be like, yeah, they were just going to be like, this is an amazing card, and you could force your opponent into, whatever class it is. You might want to play Fire, and you go, okay, I'm going to force my opponent here into Dromai because there's no way they're going to pass that card down. Now, in this Uprising set, that is a little bit more difficult because, like you said, with the powerful equipment and the red generics, these are generally what people are picking up early. So I found that as well, to keep that in mind, that you're not going to be able to force the people downstream early in the draft into the class that you want when everyone's just picking red generics and equipment early in the draft. Some people are picking generics and equipment right through 6 picks, we found, and they've had 3-0 draft decks doing that. So keep that in mind. Yeah. Red generics and equipment are early picks, very early picks.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add on to that as well is that in Uprising, I think sending signals was actually pretty important, which I don't think it has been in other draft formats. I think it was a lot easier to do. Like Paul's saying, in Uprising, you send the card, the pack distribution was really tight. You knew the pack distribution pretty much down to, by the time you got to pick 2 or pick 3, sometimes even after pick 1, you knew exactly what had been taken. That's a lot harder in this format. Now, at top of the show, before we jump onto the interview with Paul, you can hear me talk about pack distribution and pack breakdown across the 2 print runs for a bit of information about how you maybe can do that. But one thing I think in this particular format with Outsiders, actually reading the signal is, once you get into mid-pack and end of pack, that's where you're going to really get rewarded. What's on the wheel? When I say what's on the wheel, what's come back to you from your first pack? Maybe you noticed that there was 2 or 3 Ranger cards, 2 last cards of a Ranger have been taken. I really don't want to be in Ranger at that point. Even if I don't know it's the person to my right, it could be the person, my 2 to my left. I'm going to get punished in pack 2. I don't want to be there. Versus, I hedged early and now all of a sudden I'm getting late stealth cards, red stealth cards. I'm going to, I'm taking the signal. I'm getting straight into Azuri or Arachne or whatever it is. And I think you're going to get a lot more rewarded in this set for reading, and a lot less rewarded for trying to send, I think, is kind of my big takeaway.
Yeah, 100% on you. I think it is quite easy mid-pack one to get a good feeling of reading what the one or two people, maybe three people to your right are on. I think that's definitely fine. And I think further to that point, to be successful in Outsiders draft, you really have to be comfortable to switch. If you have read it wrong and you're getting towards the end of pack one, you can switch. This draft format allows for that. I've tested both. Okay, I've tested switching and I've tested being stubborn, and switching is definitely more advantageous.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to do pack one, pick one, Paul. So I'm going to open this pack, and we're going to come back. You can hear that sweet crack of the pack, and you're going to see a cut to Paul evaluating what he wants to take from this beautiful pack. So let's do it. All right, here on screen, you do see the pack. This is what our good friend, the Tall Timmy, is currently looking at and making his decisions, his thought process. I'm just going to break down what's in this pack quickly, though. So we do have a pack that has the 3 generic 6 class common split. We've got a 2-2-2 split across the classes. Now, I'll read this out in case you're listening just on audio. So the pack does contain red Spring Load, blue Seek Horizon, yellow Freewheeling Renegades, yellow Isolate, blue Malign, red Twin Twisters, blue Head Jab, yellow Infecting Shot, blue Station Shot. Then our hybrid card is a blue Plunge. We have Seeker's Leggings at the equipment slot. In the rears, we have Wreak Havoc yellow, Lace with Frailty red, of course. And then our foil is yellow Descendant Gust Wave. So, Paul, open it up and ask you, what are the first things looking at this pack that you're thinking about?
Okay, there's no really powerful red generics. Okay, Spring Load, I am looking at that, but I wouldn't say, Spring Load is no Wreak Havoc in red, okay, or it's no Red Humble, but that's what I'm seeing initially. I'm also seeing the Lace of Frailty might be okay, but again, pigeoning myself, first picking a Ranger card seems somewhat awkward. You're not passing down a red arrow, so I don't mind that. Evaluating it, yeah, there's no equipment in here that I'm seeing that I'd want to first pick. I think I would probably go with. I think I'd go with Spring Load for a couple of reasons. I think Spring Load is a great card. If you sculpt it correctly and you play your hands out correctly, it's usually a 1 for 5. I'd say more often than not. It's also great in Benji, perhaps late game. If you hold another card, it's 2 more unpreventable damage because it's just a 2. There could be an argument to pick up Twin Sisters if you're thinking of that, or a Lace. But I just think in this instance, especially for the first pick, I do want to stay open, and I think Outsiders Draft affords that. So my first pick, Hayden, would be the Spring Load.
All right, Tall Timmy locking in Spring Load. I'll add my 2 cents as well. I mean, I think it's a great pick. I think Spring Load. Look, 1 for 5 might have been underwhelming in other sets. A generic with block 2, no go again, and that's at best. It is not on this set. It is a real piece of utility, that 1 cost, because of all the 2 cost effects. Kadachi Spring Load is a 2 card 7. Arachne or Azuri with the Spider's Bite, a 2 card for 6, but threatens to push, effectively be net more damage because of the Spider's Bite ability. It's really important. So I think it's a great shout. The cards I pulled to the front just as kind of because I've got the pack physically in my hand, so I have the advantage that the Tall Timmy doesn't have. I pulled to the front Spring Load red, the Lace of Frailty, as you spoke about, the yellow Wreak Havoc, the Twin Twisters, as you spoke about, and Seeker's Leggings. I think I'm a little bit higher on Seeker's Leggings than maybe you are. I really like the Seeker's equipment. I think with this pack, the Twin Twisters as a pick, there's not a particularly good ninja card, and another ninja card in the pack. There's a yellow Descendant Gust Wave and a blue Head Jab, which if I can wield the blue Head Jab, not the worst thing. I think that card's really powerful. Lace of Frailty you talked about. I think that card is quite powerful. I think it's one of the best pumps you can have in Ranger. And there is, 2 arrows that I would be happy to come back around. A Sedation Shot blue and a yellow Infecting Shot, both I think are very good. So I don't think that pick is particularly bad either. I think the Wreak Havoc is worse than Spring Loaded, I think, than the Red Spring Load. So I think I would be with you. I'd either take the Spring Load, I think, or the Laces Frailty. I think I'd probably pass the Twin Twisters down, and I think I'll tell you what, I'll be a little bit different. I'll be contrarian. I'll take the Lace of Frailty, but I think it's really close. There's I think 5 pretty defensible first picks in this pack, which is interesting. They're all pretty close in power level.
I think you're spot on, Hayden. I would, yeah. My 1 and 2 was the Lace and the in the spring load. So yeah, I like that pick, Hayden. I think that's a good pick.
Cool. Why don't we round out this kind of first impressions of Outsiders, my time with the Tall Timmy? Why don't you talk to me about some cards that you think maybe are first picks that people aren't considering, or just kind of some of your initial thoughts around early picks? We've just done a pack 1, pick 1. I noticed how much you valued the generic there. Talk to me about your strategy when it comes to early picks.
Well, early picks, pack 1, pick 1. I think we summed it up. I am looking to stay open, and unless I'm seeing a real big bomb that we don't really. Thankfully, we don't have a lot in this set. I think red generics or pieces of equipment is where you want to be at. If I do see quite a few front pumps coming my way in a couple of packs, then I will look to pick them up and move into Ranger. I think that's a safe bet because I think both Ranger classes value them quite high, so I think it's a great signal. I think early pickups, you are able, especially early in the draft, to pick up those important Benji cards because I don't think they're being valued quite highly. I think traps also are quite important to pick up early. I don't think people are valuing them quite high. We are seeing traps wheel on the regular. So I do like picking up those as well. I definitely want to do some more testing with different Riptide builds, possibly utilizing more traps. So from my early learnings, that's what I like. I think the red generics, Hayden, just play well in any deck. Coming in with a 2-card hand with Katsu, swinging with a Kadachi, and then coming in with a Humble. Great hand. You block with 2 cards and you're coming in for 7 with a relevant on hit, especially if you're facing against Arachne. It's a great hand. So I think every deck can play the red generics. That's why they're so highly sought after.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think those ones that are 2 for 6s, I think, particularly go into every deck because at worst they're a 2 for 6, but at best they can be a 2 for 7 with something like Kadachi, or maybe you have a piece of the chest equipment, which I think are very high picks, Silken Gi and Tunic, 3-bear Tunic, to make your 2-card hand, with something like a Spider's Bite, also a 3-card 7. Sorry, a 2-card 7. I think the other thing as well, my kind of takeaway is I'm maybe a little bit more bold than you, I think, at the moment in terms of some of the cards I'll take early. I'm not necessarily, like I would take a Twin Twisters, I would take a Laces Frailty from this pack. I don't know if that's going to be correct. I'm really interested to see kind of, I'm never married to my first pick. That's something I really want to point out to people, is that maybe I take this Laces Frailty as we spoke about. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to make my deck. I might take a generic after that, a piece of generic equipment, and then start to see assassin cards coming my way. And I'm happy to pivot and put that Laces Frailty down. I don't have to play my first pick. If I think that my first pick is over and away just such a powerful card that I think it's correct to take it and hedge on it, then I will. And I'm interested to see kind of where that might lead in this format. Like you said, maybe the best way is just to stay as open as possible versus hedging a little bit, but we will see for sure. I'm excited to draft more. I know you are. We're about to do it. We're going to do a draft tonight, actually. So, I'll give you the recap on that as well.
2 cards, 2 other quick honourable mentions that I'd like to say: Death Touch and Virulent Touch. Okay, to me, those cards they're game enders, right? They really are. They can pivot a game and they can get you tempo or maintain tempo, unlike I think any other single card. So if I do see red Virulent Touches or a red Death Touch, safe to assume the people next to me are not playing Azuri or Riptide, perhaps. So I really, really like those cards, and I will pick them aggressively. Even yellow Death Touch and even yellow Virulent Touch in Riptide, I've got no problem playing that card at all. I think they're fantastic.
Cool. Well, if you haven't already, go and check out the Tall Timmy YouTube channel. Paul, I want to say a massive thank you for joining me on Limited Time Only. We have a bunch of great guests coming on. We have in the next few weeks, we've got the #1 limited ranked ELO player in the world, Freddie from Germany, will be joining me. Thank you again, Paul. Just want to say, give you one last chance to, I guess, plug anything you want to or anything coming up for yourselves. People will see you in Baltimore, right? So go make sure you check out, say hello to the Tall Timmy.
Yeah, cheers. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on the YouTube. You can hit me up however you would like. That's right. I will be in Baltimore. Looking forward to it. Going to be playing in the Calling, and I've got some big announcements, Hayden, coming that I'm going to be doing with MinMax on the Friday, MinMax Games. So keep an ear out for that. I think it's going to be a great event, and I can't wait to see the pros draft Outsiders. It's going to be fantastic.
Awesome. Well, until next time on Limited Time Only, we will see you in the next episode.
Cheers, Hayden.